The single mom waitress was told to smile more. The mafia boss said she doesn't owe you that. The Blue Lark Diner smelled of stale coffee, industrial bleach, and the damp wool of sailors caught in Falcon Bay's perpetual drizzle. It was 2:13 in the morning. Juniper Vale, 27 years old and running on 4 hours of broken sleep, felt the grit of the graveyard shift settling into her bones. Every order of Sunny Side Up felt like a small defeat. A beefy hand attached to a drunk in a paint-stained hoodie slammed the table. "Hey, waitress!" Juniper turned, balancing an empty pot of coffee. More coffee. "Sir." The man's eyes were bloodshot and watery. He leered, a wet, sloppy grin. "You know your problem. You're not friendly. You should smile more, sweetheart. Make it look like you enjoy the job." Juniper's spine stiffened. The request, casual and entitled, landed like a slap. She thought of her son, Milo, asleep in their studio apartment 3 blocks away. She thought of the lock she'd had to rig herself because the landlord refused. She was smiling on the inside, a smile made of broken glass. "My job is to bring you coffee," she said, her voice flat and cold. The man's grin vanished. "What did you say to me?" He began to slide out of the booth, his bulk knocking the salt shaker. His hand shot out, not to grab, but to swipe at her apron. "An assertion of casual ownership," I said. "Smile for me." "She doesn't owe you that." The voice came from the counter. It was not loud, but it cut through the hum of the fluorescent lights and the sizzle of the grill. Juniper hadn't even registered the other customer. It was just a shape in a dark, expensive-looking coat, nursing a single espresso. Now he stood. Ronaldo Lombardo, head of the Lombardo family, even in Falcon Bay, a place that thrived on anonymity. His face was known. He was still, but his stillness was predatory. The drunk froze, his hand hovering near Juniper's waist. Ronaldo picked up his steak knife and gently tapped the serrated edge against the ceramic of his empty plate. Tink, tink, tink. The sound was precise, sharp, and more threatening than any shout. The diner, which held maybe 5 other souls, went utterly silent. Juniper's heart hammered. She instinctively brought her round, metal tray up to her chest, a flimsy shield. Her hand was shaking, but not from the drunk. It was the sudden, suffocating presence of the man defending her. This was a different kind of danger, one that didn't lunge but waited. The image of Milo, curled up with his worn-out stuffed bear, flashed behind her eyes. She hated this. The drunk, sensing a shift in power he couldn't challenge, lowered his hand. He was stupid with whiskey, but not suicidal. "I was just telling her to be nice," he stammered. Ronaldo placed the knife down, perfectly parallel to his fork. "And I am telling you to pay your bill and to leave." The drunk fumbled for his wallet. "I'll be back," he muttered, directing the threat at Juniper. "Someone ought to teach you some manners." A smile touched Ronaldo's lips, but it was dry, like old paper. Unlikely. He slid a $50 bill onto the counter for his own meal, far more than the espresso cost. His voice dropped, meant only for the drunk, but loud enough for Juniper to hear. Aunt May's place isn't on the list of approved shakedowns. The drunk scrambled out, the bell above the door jangling violently in his wake. Juniper exhaled, the breath ragged. She hated this feeling. The feeling of being saved by a man whose reputation was built on things far worse than a drunk's clumsy pass, but she also knew what Ronaldo meant. The Vulture Syndicate, a ghost crew that ran tech-based extortion, was strangling the block. They hit small businesses with ransomware, skimmed POS systems, and bled them dry. Aunt May's diner was next. Juniper could feel it. Ronaldo put on his coat. He didn't look at her with anything resembling flirtation. His eyes were dark, assessing. He was calculating. He walked to the door and paused, holding it open. The wind blasted a sheet of rain into the entryway. He held out a heavy, black umbrella. "It's a bad night to be walking," he said. Juniper hesitated. Taking it felt like accepting a marker, but the rain was a deluge, and Milo was her priority. She reached out, her fingers brushing the smooth, wooden handle. He made sure their hands did not touch. The boundary was absolute. He nodded once, then stepped out into the storm and vanished. The walk home was tense. The umbrella was a heavy, foreign weight in her hand. She let herself into the studio, the scent of damp plaster and Milo's baby soap greeting her. Her son was fast asleep, his breathing soft. She checked the flimsy chain lock twice before sinking onto her own mattress. She opened her mail, a small stack of envelopes she'd grabbed on the way in. One stood out. It was from the Urban Commerce Authority, the UCA. Her rent was being increased by 20% effective the 1st of next month. The reason listed mandatory neighborhood revitalization fee. Revitalization. That's what they called it when they pushed people like her out. Her phone buzzed, a frantic series of texts from Aunt May. "It's locked. Juniper, the whole system is locked. I can't open the register." Juniper's blood went cold. She threw her jacket back on, kissed Milo's forehead, and ran the 3 blocks back to the Blue Lark, the Mafia-loaned umbrella forgotten by the door. Aunt May was pale, wringing her hands. The diner's POS terminal, old but reliable, was bright red. A stylized hawk, wings spread, dominated the screen. The message was simple. "Your files are encrypted by Kestrel 9. Transfer the requested stablecoin to the following wallet or your data will be permanently deleted. You have 24 hours. "They want $5,000, May whispered. Juniper felt the floor drop out from under her. $5,000. It might as well have been $5 million. She grabbed the mouse, clicking, trying to force a reboot, but the malware held fast. She had dropped out of a systems design program when she got pregnant, but she remembered the basics. This was sophisticated. "I can fix this." "May," Juniper promised, her voice harder than she felt. "I don't need anyone's help." She would not be a victim. She would not rely on men who offered umbrellas in the rain. As she was tracing the terminal's cables, looking for a hard network cutoff, her own cell phone rang, a blocked number. She answered, "Hello?" Only static, then a voice, digitally distorted, low and metallic. "A word of advice. Little bird, stop trying. Tonight, the Blue Lark is scheduled for a permanent blackout. We mean that quite literally." The line clicked dead. Juniper stared at the POS screen. The Kestrel 9 logo seemed to mock her. Outside, the rain turned to ice and began to hammer the windows of the empty diner. The morning air was thick with the smell of the low tide. Juniper, running on fumes and the acidic burn of yesterday's coffee, walked Milo to the Harbor Nest Community Daycare. She gripped his small, 4-year-old hand tightly. "Milo," she said, crouching to look him in the eye before they reached the gate. "What's the rule?" Milo, sleepy but serious, puffed out his chest. "My body, my rules." "That's right. If you don't want a hug, you say no. If you don't want to be tickled, you say no. You don't owe anyone a hug you don't want to give." She kissed his forehead, the irony bitter on her tongue. She was teaching her son the very lesson she was still fighting for at 27. She didn't owe anyone a smile. She watched him run inside before she turned and sprinted back to the Blue Lark. She found Aunt May near tears. The Kestrel 9 ransomware screen was still blinking its 24-hour countdown, now down to 19. But that wasn't the immediate problem. "It's the freezer. June. The big walk-in. The breaker keeps tripping." May pointed a shaking finger at the electrical box near the kitchen. "Oksana says it smells like hot wires, like burning plastic. We're going to lose everything, all the meat, all the dairy." Juniper's stomach tightened. A tripping breaker wasn't just bad luck. Combined with the threat of a permanent blackout, it was a classic setup. A fire that starts in the fuse box is an electrical fault, a dry burn. No accelerant, just overloaded wires, an accident that insurance would fight, and that would close them for good. "Okay," Juniper said, forcing her voice to be steady. She was operating on a level of organized exhaustion that felt almost supernatural. "Okay, first things first." She pulled out her phone and dialed the number for the Civic Anti-Corruption Directorate, the CAD, the city agency supposedly set up to handle exactly this kind of predatory business practice. After 10 minutes on hold, listening to a tinny loop of jazz, a bored voice answered. Juniper explained it all, fast and precise: the ransomware, the locked POS, the threats, the suspicious electrical faults. The woman on the other end sighed, a sound of profound indifference. Ma'am, Kestrel 9 is a known nuisance. We suggest you do not pay, but we cannot retrieve your files. As for the electrical issue, that's a matter for your utility provider. All our field agents are currently prioritized for the Edison Heights redevelopment project. We simply don't have the resources to investigate a diner's faulty wiring. The line clicked. Juniper stared at the phone. Edison Heights, the same project the UCA was using to justify her rent hike. It wasn't incompetence, it was policy. The city was letting this happen. The bitterness tasted like pennies. The bell above the diner door jangled, signaling the first wave of the lunch rush, and with it, Rinaldo Lombardo. He took the same stool at the counter he'd had last night, as if it were his reserved seat. He wore a gray suit that probably cost more than her rent for an entire year. Juniper grabbed a menu. "We're not open," she snapped, her anger at the cad looking for a target. "The register is down." "I know," Rinaldo said. He didn't look at the menu. "I'll have the black coffee, and the breakers are tripping on your walk-in freezer." Juniper froze. "How do you know that?" "He's a customer. Juniper," Aunt May hissed, bustling over and placing a cup in front of him. May was old-school Falcon Bay. She knew who Rinaldo was, and she knew the rules of hospitality were sacred, even for him. "You're not alone in this, kid," she whispered to Juniper, a plea and a warning. Juniper wanted to scream. She wanted to throw this special customer out on his ear. She didn't want this kind of help. Rinaldo took a sip of the coffee. He didn't offer money. He didn't offer flowers or condolences. Instead, he slid a folded piece of paper across the counter. It wasn't a check. It was a drawing. Juniper unfolded it. It was a schematic, hand-drawn in precise, sharp ink, a map of the block's electrical grid. "They're not just overloading it," Rinaldo said, his voice low. He tapped a specific junction box marked on the drawing, one located in the alley behind the diner. "They're lazy. They pulled a bypass from the main conduit and wired it directly to your freezer's thermostat, a heat trap. Every time the compressor kicks on, it draws triple the amps. Sooner or later, the insulation melts and the whole wall goes up." Juniper stared at the diagram. This was detailed. This was inside information. "Why are you—" The diner bell jangled again, cutting her off. Two men entered. They were not sailors or dock workers. They wore matching gray suits, cheaper than Rinaldo's. Ill-fitting and smelling faintly of cigarettes, the Vulture Syndicate, in the flesh. They ignored the counter and walked straight to Aunt May, the taller one, with a face like a worn-out shoe, smiled. "Ladies, we heard you're having some technical difficulties and some electrical problems. It's a dangerous neighborhood." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a confidential, slimy tone. "We're starting a new service, a protection plan, just for the women and children of this block. Make sure everyone stays safe." Juniper felt the blood rush to her head. "Protection from what you?" The man's smile tightened. "You're the one from last night, aren't you? The one who doesn't smile." "So," Juniper shot back, gripping a heavy water pitcher, "is this new protection plan priced per smile or by the pound?" The second man, who hadn't spoken, put his hand inside his jacket. Rinaldo didn't move. He didn't stand. He didn't even look at them. He just picked up his coffee cup and took another slow sip, his eyes on Juniper. But the message was clear. The air crackled. The two suits had seen him when they walked in, and they knew exactly who was watching this scene unfold. Rinaldo just tilted his head, a silent question. "Are you done?" The tension snapped. Oksana, the diner's massive, Ukrainian-born grill cook, who had been watching from the kitchen pass through, made her move. She slammed her hand against the red emergency fire suppression button on the wall. With a loud thump, the main lights cut out and the red emergency strobes kicked on. Simultaneously, Oksana grabbed a CO2 fire extinguisher and blasted it at the main breaker box. A cloud of icy fog hit the wall, and with a brilliant blue-white flash, the heat trap Ronaldo had described short-circuited spectacularly, showering the floor in sparks. The two gray suits jumped back, their protection ruse utterly exposed. They were caught. "You're making a mistake," the tall one snarled, his composure gone. He pointed a finger at Juniper. "Midnight, that's your deadline, for the cash and for the protection fee." They backed out of the diner, the bell mocking their retreat. Oksana calmly reset the breakers, and the normal lights flickered back on, illuminating the chemical frost on the wall. Ronaldo placed a few bills on the counter. "The diagram is yours. That trap was sloppy. The next one won't be." He stood to leave. Pausing as he passed Juniper, he set a simple, black business card on the counter. "Instead of a ring," he said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips, referencing the drunk's insult. It wasn't an offer of marriage, it was an offer of an alliance. It's a private line, for when the cad tells you they're too busy. Juniper stared at the card. She didn't want it. Taking it was a step into his world, a world of shadows and blood. But the blue-white flash of the electrical fire was burned into her vision. Midnight was only hours away. She reluctantly, slowly, picked up the card. It was heavy, made of metal, a lifeline she never asked for, but one she knew, with sickening certainty. She was going to need... That night, she held Milo in her bed. The studio apartment felt thin, the walls like paper. She listened as a car with a souped-up engine tore down the street, its engine revving. It circled the block once, twice, and then a third time, before speeding off into the night. It was the sound of a gathering storm. The deadline passed. Midnight came and went, marked only by the drip of the leaky faucet in the Blue Lark's kitchen. Juniper had sent Aunt May home. She told her she was staying late to do a full inventory of the walk-in, a lie that tasted like ash. In truth, she was standing watch. The Kestrel 9 timer on the POS screen now read 3 hours, 44 minutes. A quiet click echoed from the back of the diner, not the heavy tumbler lock of the front door, but the simple latch on the alley delivery door. Juniper's breath caught. She didn't scream. She moved silently, her worn sneakers making no sound on the checked linoleum. She slipped into the dry storage pantry, peering through the gap in the door. The alley door creaked open. The neon sign of the bar across the street cast 2 long, distorted shadows onto the kitchen floor. They were dressed in dark hoodies, their faces obscured. One carried a red 5-gallon gas canister. A sharp chemical smell, cutting through the familiar scent of old grease, filled the air. Gasoline. They began sloshing it along the baseboards, soaking the old, dry wood beneath the breaker box. They were going to finish the job the heat trap had failed to do. Panic, cold and sharp, seized Juniper. She looked around desperately. Her eyes landed on the manual fire alarm, the red metal box by the kitchen exit. She slammed her fist against it. The clang, clang, clang of the internal bell was deafening in the small space. The 2 shadows cursed. "Cops'll be here, light it!" one of them hissed. The other fumbled in his pocket for a lighter. Juniper acted on pure, maternal adrenaline. She wasn't saving a diner, she was saving the only thing that kept a roof over her son's head. She grabbed the nearest, heaviest thing she could find, a 50-pound bag of rock salt used for the winter sidewalks. She burst through the pantry door just as the man with the lighter flicked it open. He tossed the flame. A line of blue fire raced along the gasoline trail. "No!" Juniper screamed, with a strength she didn't know she possessed. She ripped the heavy paper bag open and heaved the entire contents forward. The heavy crystals of salt scattered, hitting the floor and the gasoline trail with a hiss. It didn't put the fire out, but it broke the accelerant line, splashing and diluting the fuel. The flames sputtered, contained to a small pool near the door. But the wall was safe. She stood panting, the empty bag at her feet, soot staining her hands. The 2 arsonists stared, shocked by the assault. Now she was trapped. They were between her and the front door, and a small, acrid-smelling fire blocked the back. The alley was a dead end. The taller one advanced, pulling a crowbar from his belt. The smell of burning trash and rubber filled her lungs. "You just had to be difficult, didn't you?" A sound came from the alley mouth, over the clang of the alarm, footsteps. "She did," a voice answered. Rinaldo Lombardo stepped from the shadows of the alley, a dark raincoat slick with drizzle. He moved with a terrifying economy of motion. He didn't rush. He didn't draw a gun. He was carrying a silver, commercial-grade foam extinguisher. He tossed it, end over end, into the small blaze by the door. The fire vanished in an instant, smothered under a blanket of white foam. In the sudden, dark confusion, Rinaldo was past the two men. He grabbed Juniper's upper arm. The grip was not intimate, not violent. It was a grip of pure logistics, designed to move her. "This way." He pulled her toward the rusty, zigzagging fire escape ladder on the adjacent building. The two arsonists, suddenly faced with a man whose reputation preceded him, backed away. They recognized a predator they could not fight. Rinaldo shoved Juniper toward the ladder. Up. His eyes, catching the dim red light of the diner's alarm, were not ordering her. They were assessing her, checking for damage. "Are you okay?" The question was sharp, demanding a practical answer, not reassurance. Juniper, her throat raw from the smoke, nodded, "I'm okay." The two men scrambled back to their sedan. The squeal of their tires echoed down the empty street as they fled. The sirens arrived 15 minutes later. Not Falcon Bay PD, the crisp, new vehicles of the UCA patrol. Their uniforms were dark blue, spotless, and looked more corporate than civic. They took Juniper's statement with an air of profound boredom. "So, ma'am, it appears you had a small equipment malfunction that started a grease fire," the officer said, clicking his pen. "And you scared off some vagrants who were probably trying to keep warm in your alley." Juniper stared at him, the extinguisher foam dripping onto her shoe. "That was gasoline. They were pouring gasoline. I have the canister." The officer sighed. "The canister is contaminated by the foam. There's no usable evidence. We'll file the report. Equipment malfunction." A cold certainty settled in Juniper's stomach. This wasn't incompetence. This was a green light. The UCA wasn't here to protect her. They were here to file the paperwork that would allow the diner to be condemned. Someone at the city level was holding the door open for the vultures. She went back inside. The diner, a mess of foam, salt, and the stench of chemicals. The Kestrel 9 ransomware screen was still blinking patiently. But the attack had triggered something in the old system. A new log file she hadn't seen before. A network connection attempt log. Most of the IP addresses were masked, routed through servers in Eastern Europe, but one was not. A single, hardwired address that had pinged the system exactly 1 minute before the back door was breached. Her fingers, still shaking, typed the IP into a traceroute search on her phone. Her blood ran cold. City Hall, sub-office, administration, Deputy Mayor Kellen Ward. Kellen Ward, the man whose face was on every bus stop, promoting the Clean East Bank revitalization project, the man whose UCA was levying the fees that were bankrupting them. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in years. "B, it's Juniper Vale, from the Community College Tech Program." B. Rooker, the independent blogger behind the Falcon Bay Watchdog, sounded tired. "June, it's 2 a.m. What is it?" "I have Deputy Mayor Kellen Ward's office IP address logging into my diner's POS system right before an arson attempt, and I have the UCA patrol report that calls it an equipment malfunction," Juniper said, the words tumbling out. There was a long silence on the line. "Juniper," B said, her voice suddenly wide awake. "You're holding dynamite. I'll run it. But I need a face for the story. I need your story. A single mother in the vortex of gentrification. Can you give me that?" "You can have it," Juniper said, "if you promise to burn him to the ground." She hung up and saw Rinaldo standing by the foam-covered doorway. He had never left. "They're connected," Juniper whispered, the realization hitting her. "The vultures and the city. Ward." "Yes," Rinaldo said. It wasn't a surprise to him. They'll come after Milo, she said, the terror hitting her. My people can take him to Harbor Nest, Ronaldo offered, his voice quiet. A secure vehicle. They won't see it coming. Juniper's protective instincts recoiled. No, absolutely not. I don't want your men anywhere near my son. Ronaldo nodded once, accepting the boundary. As you wish. And he was gone. The next morning, Juniper walked Milo to daycare in a driving, miserable rain. By the time they got there, Milo's thin jacket was soaked through and his teeth were chattering. She looked at his small, shivering shoulders, and her pride felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. She pulled out the black metal card and dialed the number. Fine, she said when Ronaldo answered. Her voice was tight with humiliation and defeat. You can have him taken, but I want Nora, your female bodyguard. Only her. She's the only one who drives him. Understood, Ronaldo replied, and the line went dead. The next day, a quiet black sedan driven by a woman with calm, sharp eyes Nora pulled up. Milo, thrilled by the fancy car, climbed into the booster seat. As they drove, he pointed out the window. Ronaldo's own car was 2 lengths behind them, a silent shadow. Mommy, Milo asked, his voice small, is that man a superhero? Juniper watched the car in the side mirror, a heavy, complicated knot of reliance and fear in her stomach. No, baby. He's just a man who knows the right thing to say when it matters. The shaky truce lasted exactly 1 day. That evening, Juniper's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was a photograph. It was her, taken through the diner window, holding a heavy coffee pot, her face drawn with exhaustion. It was the face she saw in the mirror every morning. Text was overlaid on the image. Smile, or we'll take what you love. It wasn't a threat against the diner. It wasn't about money. It was a direct, poisoned arrow aimed at her motherhood. They were threatening Milo. The threat against Milo changed the atmosphere from one of survival to one of war. Juniper was the one who requested the meeting. She chose the location Greenpoint Pier, an abandoned ferry terminal on the edge of Falcon Bay, its guts converted by optimistic locals into a humid, sprawling community greenhouse. It smelled of damp earth, salt, and the faint decay of the pilings beneath. It was neutral ground, and she had demanded he come alone. He did. She turned from the fogged-up glass, her arms crossed tight against the chill that had nothing to do with the weather. The photo on her phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. What do you want? Ronaldo, what's your angle in my family? He stood a respectable 6 feet away, his dark, tailored coat seeming absurdly formal among the rows of struggling tomato vines and bags of potting soil. It's not your family I want anything from. Juniper, he said, his voice quiet, absorbing the ambient sound of the greenhouse. It's the line, the vultures, Ward, whoever is pulling their strings. They crossed it. He looked at a patch of wilting basil. My father had rules. Some were brutal, but they had a kind of logic. You don't target civilians, you don't shake down old women for their grocery money, and you do not threaten children. He finally met her gaze, and there was nothing soft in it. Anyone who bullies the weak has to pay. It's the only rule that keeps the world from eating itself. The air was taut. This was not the answer she expected. The quiet, cold fury in his voice disarmed her. The man, the one who sent that picture, I think I know who it is, she confessed, the words tasting like poison. She hadn't said the name aloud in years. Milo's father, Brett Kincaid. She rushed the words, needing to get them out. We were together at the community college just for a few months. I was in the systems design program. He was just a guy. He drove delivery vans. When I told him I was pregnant, he vanished, dropped out, left town. She looked at her own hands, calloused from carrying hot plates and scrubbing grout. I heard he'd fallen in with a bad crew. Now, I think he's a runner for the vultures. He must have recognized me at the diner. This is personal for him. He thinks I ruined his life. Ronaldo listened, his focus absolute. He didn't offer pity. He simply processed the information. The humidity of the greenhouse seemed to trap their words, making the air heavy. "My mother," he said, his voice dropping so low she had to lean in slightly, "was a waitress in a place just like the Blue Lark, over in the old district. She worked doubles. She used to smell like stale coffee and bleach." He paused, and for a second, he was not the head of the Lombardo family. He was just a man. "When I was 10, our rivals decided to send my father a message. They didn't come for him. They went to her diner during her shift. They called it cleaning house. She wasn't the target. She was just collateral damage." He turned to face her fully, the unspoken trauma settling between them. "That is why I have one unbreakable rule: my organization does not touch women or children, and we make an example of those who do." The air between them was electric, thick with shared, though vastly different, wounds. An attraction was there, undeniable, simmering beneath the surface of their crisis. But it was tangled in conflict. Juniper hated this. She hated the price that always came with protection from powerful men. "I can't be in your debt, Ronaldo," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "I can't pay that kind of interest." "Oh, I'm not asking you to be," he said. He stepped closer, not threateningly, but to close the space of their negotiation. "I am not asking you for a single smile." The callback to the drunk's demand hung in the air. "I'm asking for your cooperation. You have the technical skills. You know the man who is running the street-level operation. I have the resources to trace the money. They declared war on your son. I am merely offering to be your ally." She saw the logic. It was a partnership, not a rescue. Her mind, the part that loved systems and code, clicked into place. "A honeypot," she said, thinking aloud. "The Kestrel 9 ransomware is aggressive, but it's sloppy. It left that IP log. If I can build a false directory on the POS, make it look like a vulnerability, I can bait them into trying to access it. I can trap Brett or whoever is behind the keyboard. Get their credentials." "Good," Ronaldo nodded. "While you set the trap, my people will follow the money, the revitalization fees that UCA is collecting. We'll find out where it's being washed. That shell company, Ward's Civic Partners." The plan gave her a sense of control she hadn't felt in days, but the enemy was moving faster than she knew. Ronaldo had insisted on walking her back to her studio apartment. As they rounded the corner to her chipped front door, they both stopped. Two people, a man and a woman in bland, official-looking polos, were waiting. "Miss Juniper Vale?" the woman asked, her smile tight and insincere. She held a clipboard. "Yes. We're from the Family Wellness Commission," the man said. "We received an anonymous tip regarding the welfare of your son, Milo, allegations of neglect. We need to come in." Juniper's vision went white with rage. "Smile, or we'll take what you love." This was it. This was the vultures. This was Ward. They were making good on their threat, using the city itself as their weapon. "Neglect," she repeated, her voice shaking. "I work 80 hours a week to keep him fed and safe." The FWC man stepped forward, his hand on the doorframe. "We just need to come in, ma'am, and look at the premises." Juniper felt Ronaldo's presence. He took one single, deliberate step back. He didn't speak. He didn't interfere. He simply ceded the ground to her, letting her be the one to handle the state's intrusion. But he did not leave. He stood behind her, a solid, immovable wall of silent support. That small retreat gave Juniper back her power. She took a deep breath, unlocked her door, and stepped aside, her chin high. "Be my guest. Check the fridge. It's full. Check his bed. The sheets are clean. He has books. He has toys. He is safe." The two agents entered, their professional skepticism wavering as they took in the tiny, shabby but spotless studio. Milo, playing with worn wooden blocks on a clean rug, looked up and waved, happy and perfectly healthy. The FWC agents found nothing. They opened the refrigerator to find fresh milk and vegetables. They checked the bathroom. It was clean. "The apartment is adequate," the woman conceded, clearly disappointed. "But Miss Vale, Given the anonymous concerns, we will be monitoring the situation. We'll be in touch." They left, their clipboard empty. The door clicked shut. Juniper leaned against it, her knees weak, the adrenaline drained away, leaving only exhaustion and the simmering humiliation of being violated in her own home. Ronaldo was still there, in the hallway. He hadn't moved. She looked at him. The tension from the pier was gone, replaced by something new, something fragile and raw. "I don't need anyone to save me," she whispered, the words catching in her throat. He just nodded, his dark eyes holding hers. "But," she added, straightening up from the door, "thank you for standing there." A single, fragile thread of trust, stronger than any steel cable, had just been tied between them. Juniper did not sleep for 36 hours. She lived on the adrenaline of her plan, her eyes burning from the glow of her laptop screen, which was precariously wired into the compromised POS system at the Blue Lark. She built the honeypot out of digital scraps and pure spite, a false directory structure that looked like a backdoor vulnerability in the Kestrel 9 malware. She baited the trap with a file named Customer Credit Cards, ZIP. At 4:05 in the morning, she got a bite. A login. The user was sloppy, impatient, using a brute force script that tripped every digital wire she had laid. She captured the login, the password, and the IP address, a dedicated server located at the Raven Key Warehouse District. But she got more than she bargained for. The user, logged in and arrogant, accidentally dropped his own toolkit into her trap while trying to retrieve the bait file. It was everything. The automated script for the Kestrel 9 download package and, more importantly, a detailed, upcoming schedule of stablecoin transfers, all funneling into a single, encrypted wallet labeled Ward Civic. She had the digital gun, and the fingerprints were all over it. She called Ronaldo. "Raven Key, Warehouse 12B. He's there now." "My team will handle it," Ronaldo's voice came back, devoid of sleep. "No," Juniper stated, the steel in her voice surprising even herself. "I'm going. I built the trap. I know the system. They have digital files, and your team breaks things. I'm going to retrieve the evidence." There was a long silence on the line. "They are dangerous. Juniper." "They threaten my son. I am dangerous." Another pause, shorter this time. "Very well. Nora will go with you, but on one condition." "What?" "My silent team will own the perimeter. No one goes in or out without my authorization, and Nora is in command. No shooting unless absolutely necessary. We are retrieving data, not starting a war." Raven Key was a graveyard of shipping containers, smelling of rust, low tide, and diesel. Nora drove the black sedan with the lights off. Parking 3 blocks away from the target, they moved through the shadows. 2 women dressed in black. Nora was a picture of professional calm, her movements fluid and silent. Juniper was vibrating, her nerves alive with a terrifying, focused energy. The lock on Warehouse 12B was a simple electronic keypad. Juniper, using the credentials she had stolen from the hacker, keyed it open. The door hissed. Inside, the warehouse was a mess of high-tech and low-life, racks of humming servers, powered by stolen electricity, filled the space. A single desk was illuminated by the glow of 6 monitors. A half-eaten sandwich discarded beside a keyboard. "He was just here," Juniper whispered. She moved to the main terminal, plugging in a ghost drive. "I need 2 minutes." "You have one," Nora replied, her gaze fixed on the entrance, her hand resting near her waist. Juniper's fingers flew across the keyboard. She bypassed his sloppy security, navigating the directories. And there it was. Not just the transfer logs, a separate, encrypted solid-state drive plugged into the server. She clicked it. It wasn't encrypted against internal users. It was labeled K accounts. The Vulture Syndicate's entire internal ledger. She started the transfer. "You?" The voice was a raw scream. Juniper spun around. Brett Kincaid stood there. He was gaunt, his face pale and pockmarked, his eyes wide with a mixture of meth-fueled rage and genuine shock. He looked nothing like the aimless delivery driver she'd known. "You," he yelled again, pointing a shaking finger. "You ruined my life. I had plans. And then you, with that kid. You owe me a life." He lunged, not at Juniper, but at the servers, his hand reaching to pull the main power cable. Nora intercepted him in a blur. It was not a fight. It was a function. A single, brutal chop to his wrist. Brett howled in pain and scrambled back. "Juniper, the drive go," Nora yelled, shoving her toward the exit. Brett didn't follow. He ran in the opposite direction, toward the heavy loading bay. With a desperate leap, he jumped onto the seat of a massive, yellow forklift. The engine roared to life. "He's blocking the exit," Nora shouted, as Brett slammed the machine into gear, the forks raised like tusks, aiming for the main door. Nora grabbed Juniper and shoved her toward a second, smaller forklift parked near the bay. "You know how to drive this?" "It's like a tractor." "Right." Juniper climbed on, her hands fumbling for the ignition. It caught. The warehouse erupted in a deafening chase of metal and screaming engines. Brett, unhinged, plowed his larger machine through a stack of empty pallets, trying to T-bone them. Nora, riding on the small step of Juniper's forklift, pointed, left between the containers. Juniper wrenched the wheel. They shot into a narrow canyon of red, rusting containers. Brett was right behind them, his engine screaming, the larger machine gaining ground. "He's too fast," Juniper yelled over the noise. "Cut the wheel hard right at the end now," Nora commanded. Juniper spun the wheel. Their forklift skidded, the back end slamming hard into the metal wall, shaking her teeth. Brett, coming in too hot, tried to follow. He couldn't make the turn. His forklift crashed through the flimsy chain-link fence at the end of the quay. With a massive splash, the entire machine plunged nose first into the dark, oily water of the wastewater ditch. For a second, there was silence. Then, Brett surfaced, coughing and sputtering black water. He clawed his way up the far bank and disappeared into the darkness. A wounded animal. He had escaped. Juniper sat, her hands shaking, still clutching the steering wheel. The ghost drive, containing the K accounts, was safe in her pocket. "He left his phone," she said, her voice numb. It was back on the desk, vibrating. Ronaldo's car pulled up just as they exited the warehouse. He got out, his face a mask of controlled calm. He arrived a half-beat too late to prevent the danger, and the self-recrimination was visible in the tight set of his jaw. His eyes scanned Nora, who gave a sharp, clear nod. Then his gaze landed on Juniper. "You're bleeding," he said. Juniper reached up. Her fingers came away wet in the chaos. She must have hit the steering column. It was a shallow scratch on her chin, but it was bright red against her pale skin. Ronaldo stepped closer, entering her personal space. The air crackled, charged with the leftover adrenaline of the chase and his proximity. He pulled a clean, white linen handkerchief and a small antiseptic wipe from his coat pocket. He did not touch her. He just held the wipe, his knuckles brushing the fabric of his coat. "May I sanitize this?" His voice was low, formal, a request for permission that was hotter than any command. Juniper, her throat too dry to speak, could only nod. His cold fingers gently cupped her chin, tilting her face up to the dim light of the key. The other hand, holding the wipe, was incredibly precise. He dabbed at the scratch. His touch was clinical, yet it sent a jolt of pure electricity through her. It was a brief, sterile touch that felt more intimate than any kiss. Her skin burned where his fingers had been. "He left this," Juniper whispered, holding up the vibrating phone. Ronaldo took it, his focus snapping back to business. He looked at the screen. One new encrypted message. Status on the Lark. A. Finch. "A. Finch," Ronaldo said, his voice hard. "The Vulture's alias for Deputy Mayor Ward. We have him." B. Rooker received the package at 5 in the morning. An anonymous drop. A single USB drive. On it was the K accounts ledger, a video file from a warehouse security camera showing an attempted assault, screenshots of the Ward Civic crypto wallet, and one clear image of an encrypted text from A. Finch. The story would explode. The city would burn by sunrise. That night, Juniper couldn't sleep. The adrenaline was gone, leaving a hollow, aching exhaustion. She sat on her mattress, watching Milo breathe. She looked out her window, across the street, half hidden in the shadows of a closed bakery. Ronaldo's car was parked. He wasn't in it. He was sitting on the bottom step of her apartment building's crumbling stoop, in the cold. His coat pulled tight. He was standing watch himself. She unlocked her door and stepped into the hallway. He looked up, his expression unreadable in the dim orange glow of the streetlight. "I'm not the bait anymore," she said quietly, the words hanging in the cold air. "I'm the hunter." A slow smile touched the corner of Ronaldo's mouth. It was not the dry, cold smile he gave his enemies. It was something else. He laughed, a low, quiet sound, barely a breath. Juniper found herself smiling back. It was a small, exhausted, but genuine smile. It was not one she owed. It was not one he demanded. It was one she owned. The rain had softened to a light, insistent tapping against the windows of her studio apartment. It was past 3 in the morning. Juniper had finished her double shift at the diner, a shift spent cleaning up the last of the foam and salt, her mind spinning with data and adrenaline. She walked up the crumbling steps to her building and stopped. Ronaldo was still there, and he was sitting on the top step, not the bottom one, his coat damp, his posture that of a man guarding a post. He looked up as she approached, his face shadowed, but his eyes were sharp. She fumbled for her keys, the exhaustion hitting her in a wave. It was absurd. A mafia boss sitting on her dirty stoop all night. "You're going to catch pneumonia," she said, her voice rough. "I've sat in worse," he replied. She unlocked the door, the metal scraping. She paused, her hand on the knob. She looked at her tiny, safe apartment, then back at the man who had become her only, terrifying ally. "I'm making hot cocoa," she said, the words sounding foreign in her own mouth. "With the good powder, the one I hide from Milo." He didn't smile, but his gaze softened. He stood up slowly, a big man unfolding from the small step. "I'm not used to cocoa. It's just this or day-old coffee. Your choice." She pushed the door open and left it that way, a silent invitation. He followed her in. The space was tiny, dominated by Milo's small cot in the corner and her own mattress on the floor. The only light came from the small, honey-yellow lamp over the kitchenette sink. Milo was fast asleep, his breathing a soft, rhythmic sound under the tapping rain. The domesticity of the scene was a shield. Juniper moved with quiet, practiced efficiency. She measured milk into a small saucepan. They didn't speak. The silence was filled by the hiss of the gas burner and Milo's soft breathing. "You're good at pancakes," he said, his voice startlingly low in the small room. He was leaning against the counter, his presence taking up all the air. She stopped stirring. "What?" "Milo. He told Nora you make pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. He said they're the best." A small, genuine huff of laughter escaped her. "They're terrible. Honestly, they always burn, but he likes them." She poured the hot milk and cocoa into 2 mismatched mugs, handing him one. "What about you?" she asked, leaning against the opposite counter. "What do you do when you're not on watch?" He looked down at his hands, which were wrapped around the warm mug. They were large, clean hands, but scarred at the knuckles. "I'm building a boat," he said. This was so unexpected. She almost laughed again. "A boat?" "A small one, a wooden skiff, from plans. I'm sanding the hull. It's precise work." He rotated the mug, not drinking. "It's a way to punish my hands, to make them do something slow, something that builds instead of breaks." The confession hung in the warm, sweet-smelling air. The distance between them, measured in feet, suddenly felt like nothing. Her eyes traced the line of his coat, resting on his wrist, a thin, white scar disappeared under his cuff. Before she could stop herself, she reached out, not touching, just hovering her fingers over the mark. "Does it hurt?" Ronaldo went absolutely still. He looked from her fingers to her face. He didn't answer her question. He just watched her, his dark eyes asking permission for 1,000 things she hadn't even offered. He slowly, deliberately shook his head. Her fingers, calloused from work, lightly brushed the scar. The skin was smooth, old. His skin was warm. He inhaled sharply at the contact. He didn't pull away. He didn't grab her. He just waited. She lifted her eyes to his. The space between them was electric, charged with exhaustion, fear, and a terrifying, magnetic pull. He leaned his head down, slowly, his gaze locked on her mouth, then moving back to her eyes. He stopped, a breath away, giving her the world to say no, to turn her head. Juniper closed the distance. The kiss was slow. It was soft. It was tentative. It was not the kiss of a conqueror or a man taking what he wanted. It was a question. His lips were gentle, tasting of the night air and nothing else. She felt his hand, the one not holding the mug, come up. It didn't go to her waist or her back. It rested on her collarbone, his thumb just brushing the pulse in her throat. The pressure was light, a point of contact, a show of respect for her boundaries. They were breathing the same air, their bodies barely touching, but the contact was overwhelming. It was a language spoken in heartbeats, in the subtle shift of weight, in the unspoken promise that this was about trust, not possession. Juniper was the one who deepened it. She, the woman who owed no one a smile, was the one who took charge. She put her hand on his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart through the fine wool of his coat. She whispered against his mouth, the words for him alone. "Hold me." His arm moved, wrapping around her, pulling her flush against him. It was not a violent pull, but an encompassing one. He was solid and warm, and he smelled like cold rain and clean linen. "Say my name," she whispered, a command. "Juniper," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her skin, and kissed her again, this time with a slow, building heat that started in her toes and coiled in her stomach. He met her pace, never pushing, never demanding, only answering what she offered. The heat was rising, the kiss turning from comfort to a low, burning need. She felt his control, and her own, and the shared desire to let it go. He was the one who stopped. He pulled back, just enough to look at her. His eyes were dark, his breathing unsteady. His hand was now tangled in her hair, but his grip was gentle. He searched her face, and his gaze was a raw, open question continue. She smiled, a real, voluntary, powerful smile. "Yes," she breathed. Everything that happened next happened behind the closed, hollow core door of her bedroom. There was no sound but the gentle click of the lock and the steady, rhythmic tapping of the rain against the glass, a metronome for the rest of the night. Later, they lay side by side on her mattress, the sheet pulled over them, their hands clasped between them on the pillow. The storm in her chest had finally, temporarily, quieted. "Tomorrow," Juniper whispered to the ceiling, "is going to be hard." She felt him turn his head. He didn't offer false promises. He didn't say it would be okay. He just lifted her hand, still woven with his, and kissed her knuckles. He shifted, pulling her closer, and pressed a long, warm kiss to her forehead. "Then let me hold the peace for you tonight." The night settled around them, a small truce of warmth and shared breath. No one had demanded a smile. They had only asked for, and been given, consent. At 5 o'clock in the morning, the city of Falcon Bay woke up choking on the truth. B. Rooker's article did not just drop, it detonated. The Falcon Bay watchdog server nearly crashed under the traffic. The headline was a declaration of war. The Reconstruction Racket Deputy Mayor Ward, the UCA, and the extortion of the Blue Lark Diner. The piece was a masterful takedown. It laid out the timeline with cold precision, the sudden UCA revitalization fees, the Kestrel 9 ransomware attack, the accidental arson attempt, and the damning IP address originating from Kellen Ward's own office. It named Ward's civic partners as the crypto wallet beneficiary. And, in the most vicious detail, it exposed how the Family Wellness Commission, the FWC, had been weaponized against Juniper Vale within hours of her refusing to be intimidated. The city's official machinery, caught in the sudden, blinding headlights, lurched into motion. By 6:30 in the morning, the Civic Anti-Corruption Directorate, the same agency that had told Juniper they were too busy, was forced to issue a public statement. They were opening a formal inquiry. By 7, Deputy Mayor Kellen Ward was on the city's flagship morning news program, his face a mask of practiced outrage. "This is a disgusting, baseless smear," Ward said, his eyes boring into the camera. He was not a man defending himself. He was a man counterattacking. This article is the work of a fringe blogger, clearly bought and paid for by organized crime. He leaned in, his voice dripping with civic concern. "We will not be intimidated by the Lombardo family or their known surrogates. Falcon Bay is moving forward, and as for the Blue Lark Diner, an establishment now clearly operating as a front for mafia activity, I am personally directing the UCA to review their business license, effective immediately." Juniper watched the broadcast on her phone. Standing behind the counter of the diner, he had just painted a target on her back and on Aunt May's for the entire city to see. The Vulture's retaliation came an hour later. It was not political. It was surgical. Juniper's phone buzzed, a new, unknown number. It was a video file. Her hands shook as she tapped it open. It was security footage from Harbor Nest Daycare. It was Milo. But the video was wrong, monstrously wrong. It was spliced, choppily edited. It showed Milo crying near the stairs, a hard cut. It showed Juniper arriving late for pickup, her face a mask of exhaustion. Cut. It showed Milo falling and scraping his knee on the playground, a normal, everyday accident. Cut. The audio was a distorted collage of a teacher's voice. "He seems so tired lately. She was running late again. He's not himself." It was a narrative of neglect, manufactured from thin air. The text message that followed the video was simple. "The FWC listens to video evidence. We have more. Pull the story, or you lose him." Juniper stumbled into the diner's back office, the taste of last night's cocoa rising in her throat. Ronaldo was there in minutes. He didn't need to be called. He knew. He watched the video once, his face hardening into granite. "They hacked the daycare," Juniper whispered, her voice broken. "They hacked his school." "He's not safe there," Ronaldo said, his voice flat. "Not while they have access." He made a call. His side of the conversation clipped and precise. He hung up and looked at her. "I have a place. The North Star Center. It's a high-security educational facility in the old cathedral. It is one of my foundations." Juniper's head snapped up. "Funded by you, a Lombardo Center, no. He's not going to be leverage." "It is funded by the Lombardo Community Trust, yes," Ronaldo said, his voice level, refusing to take the bait. "It is also state-of-the-art, has armed response security, and is completely offline. No network access from the outside. They cannot hack it." He met her eyes, the gaze unwavering. "It is also free to any family in the Harbor District. He will not be the only civilian child there. It is your choice." Juniper looked at the spliced, grotesque video on her phone. She hated this. She hated every second of this reliance. "Fine," she choked out. "He goes to North Star, but I'm not paying, and I'm not signing anything with your family name on it." "You will not have to," he said. The chessboard was in motion. B. Rooker's article had done more than just expose Ward. It had pinpointed Brett Kincaid's location from the warehouse IP trace. By noon, the real Falcon Bay PD, the ones not on the UCA's payroll, had arrested him. The news reached Ronaldo's lawyer, Gideon Hale, before it even hit the press. Hale was a shark in a $3,000 suit, and he smelled blood. "He is talking," Hale reported to Ronaldo, his voice crisp over the speakerphone so Juniper could hear. Brett Kincaid is a desperate, cornered man. He's willing to flip on the vultures and Ward, but he wants full immunity. What does he have? Ronaldo asked. The jackpot, Hale replied, a note of triumph in his voice. He claims to have the original signed partnership agreement between Deputy Mayor Ward and a shell company called North Shore Redevelopments. North Shore, he says, is the Vulture's corporate front. While Hale began the delicate negotiation with the district attorney, he also went on the offensive. At 2 p.m, he filed a temporary restraining order against the Urban Commerce Authority. We are petitioning to halt any review of the Blue Lark's license, Hale explained to Juniper, who was numbly packing Milo's dinosaur pajamas into a bag. We are attaching your sworn testimony regarding the arson attempt, Oksana's testimony, and a full engineering report on the heat trap bypass wire Ronaldo found. We are arguing the UCA is not merely negligent. They are an active, conspiring party in an extortion racket. Ward could not shut the diner down if the courts were actively investigating him for trying to burn it. That night, Nora drove Juniper to the studio apartment to grab Milo's pillow and his favorite stuffed bear before taking them to the North Star safe house. Ronaldo waited in the car downstairs, a silent shadow. Juniper was on her hands and knees, searching for Milo's missing left sneaker under his small cot. Her fingers brushed against something cold and plastic, held to the wooden slats of the bed frame with a strip of electrical tape. It was not a toy. It was a small black square, a transmitter, a listening device. She froze. They had been in her house. They had been in her house, under her son's bed. The FWC visit. Was it just surveillance? Had one of them, with their false smiles, planted it? She ripped it off, her hands trembling so violently she almost dropped it. Nora, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Nora was at her side in an instant, her professional calm hardened. She pulled out her own phone, switched it to video, and began documenting, her voice anchoring. Hold it steady. Juniper, show me the tape residue on the bed frame. Now the device. Turn it over. Juniper did as she was told. Tears of pure, undiluted rage and violation streaming silently down her face. They had been listening. They had heard her and Milo sleeping. They had heard her and Ronaldo. She stumbled down the stairs, clutching Milo's pillow in one hand and the small black bug in the other. She burst out onto the stoop. Ronaldo was out of the car, sensing the panic. She threw the bug at his chest. It bounced off his coat and landed on the wet pavement. They were in my house. They were under my son's bed, she screamed, the dam of her control finally shattering. This is your world. This is what you brought into my home, bugs and threats and men in suits. Ronaldo stood impassive, letting her rage, her fear, her exhaustion wash over him. He did not flinch. They want to take my son, she cried, sobbing now. Maybe Ward is right. Maybe I should just run. Maybe being near you is the thing that burns us down. He waited until her sobs quieted to ragged, animal breaths. Yes, he said, his voice flat and brutal in its honesty. This is my world, and you are in it. But they were in your house long before I ever sat at your counter. They were just hiding behind uniforms and clipboards. He bent down and picked up the listening device. If you are afraid of me, Juniper, you must say so. Now, if you think I am the same as them, tell me. I will withdraw. I will pull Nora. I will pull Hale. You and Milo can go to the shelter in the next county. I will give you the money. I will disappear. It is your choice. He was offering her an out, an escape from him, from the mafia, from the war. Juniper looked at the man in front of her. He had not lied to her, not once. He had not asked her to smile. He had not demanded her affection. He had given her weapons a wiring diagram, a lawyer, a safe place for her son. She wiped her face with the back of her sleeve. I'm afraid, she whispered, her voice raw. I'm terrified of losing my son. I'm afraid of them. She looked him dead in the eye. But you, I trust you. I trust you because you demand nothing. It was not a declaration of love. It was something heavier, something forged in fire and exhaustion. It was an acknowledgement that in this city of vipers, he was the only one who had respected her boundaries. It was a confession that weighed as much as the entire city. Ronaldo held her gaze. He did not move to comfort her. He did not touch her. He just nodded, accepting her answer. He closed his hand around the bug, the plastic cracking under the pressure. Then we fight them together. The sky over Falcon Bay was a heavy, bruised purple, threatening a storm that had nothing to do with the weather. Thunder rumbled, vibrating in the rotting wood of Pier 13. This was the spot Brett's terrified lawyer had chosen, a place of open air and no escape routes. Juniper stood near the edge, the wind whipping her hair across her face. Ronaldo was beside her, a solid, unmoving presence. Further back, near the bulkhead, Nora and two of Ronaldo's silent team stood watch. Brett's lawyer, Calloway, approached. His shoes slipping on the wet planks, he clutched a thin, aluminum briefcase. "You have the deal," he stammered, his eyes darting to the shadows. The DA signed off full immunity for his testimony. "Gideon Hale has the assurance," Ronaldo said, his voice cutting through the wind. "The document, Calloway." Calloway fumbled with the briefcase latches. "He said Ward is finished. He said North Shore is just the start." A high, electric whine sliced the air, drowning out the lawyer's words. It was not the wind. "Drone!" Nora shouted from the bulkhead, simultaneously raising a long, rifle-like device to her shoulder. It was too late. A small, black quadcopter, emblazoned with the Vulture's hawk insignia, zipped over their heads. It stopped, hovered, and dropped a small canister at their feet. It erupted with a pressurized hiss, blanketing the end of the pier in thick, suffocating gray smoke. Juniper coughed, her eyes streaming, blinded. She heard a scuffle, a choked gasp, and the sound of heavy boots dragging on wood. "Calloway!" she yelled. The Vultures weren't just after the briefcase. They were cleaning up the loose end. Through a momentary gap in the smoke, she saw two men in dark gear dragging the lawyer toward the edge, but they had fumbled the exchange. The aluminum briefcase lay abandoned, teetering precariously on the pier's splintered edge. As she lunged for it, a second drone appeared, this one fitted with a mechanical claw. It swooped down, fast, aiming for the briefcase. The claw snapped shut, snagging the handle, but its momentum was off. Instead of lifting it, the drone knocked the briefcase sideways. It tumbled off the pier. It didn't hit the water. It landed with a hollow clang on the tarp-covered deck of a low-slung speedboat that had been idling 20 feet below, hidden in the pier's dark shadow. Juniper didn't hesitate. That was her life. That was her city. She ran to the edge and jumped. The air rushed past her. She hit the slippery, wet tarp hard, her ankle twisting beneath her. She cried out, skidding on the unstable surface, sliding toward the open water on the boat's far side. A hand clamped around her wrist like a steel vice. Ronaldo. He had jumped with her, landing a half-second later, his balance perfect, his weight anchoring them both. He hauled her back from the edge, pulling her into the shelter of his body as the boat rocked wildly. They were crouched on the deck, the drone buzzing angrily above, the pier shrouded in smoke. Their faces were inches apart. Rain and sweat stung her eyes. His gaze was not the gaze of the man who had held her in the small, warm kitchen. There was no passion. There was only the sharp, focused, assessing look of a teammate in the middle of a war. "Are you secure?" his eyes demanded. She nodded, her throat tight. He released her wrist and moved. He was in the pilot's seat before the Vultures on the pier even realized their prize was gone. He didn't need keys. This was his boat, staged for this exact possibility. The engines roared to life, a deep, thrumming growl that shook the hull. The boat shot out from under the pier, leaving the confused drone hovering in its wake. "It's following us," Juniper yelled over the engines. Looking back, the drone was low, fast, and closing the distance. A sharp, metallic crack echoed across the water from the pier. It was not a gunshot. Nora was standing on the railing, the long device on her shoulder. A thin, visible pulse of blue light shot from the muzzle and hit the drone. The drone's rotors seized instantly. It tumbled from the sky, dead, and vanished into the churning water. An EMP rifle. "Nora is thorough," Ronaldo said, his eyes scanning the harbor. "So am I," Juniper panted. She snapped the latches on the briefcase. It was there. A thick, blue-bound legal document, partnership agreement Kellen Ward and North Shore Redevelopments. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking but her purpose absolute. She dialed B. Rooker. "B, I'm sending you a link. Go live on your primary channel. Do it right now." She switched to her camera, the signal struggling but holding. "This is Juniper Vale," she said, her voice raw but steady, the city skyline blurring behind her. "I'm on a boat in Falcon Bay, and I have the evidence." She flipped the cover open to the final page, the signatures clear in the shaky light. This is the signature of Deputy Mayor Kellen Ward, agreeing to sell city assets to North Shore Redevelopments, the corporate front for the Vulture Syndicate. She went page by page, reading the damning clauses. The internet erupted. B. Rooker's stream was mirrored, shared, and screen-grabbed thousands of times within 5 minutes. The hashtags exploded #She doesn't know you that, #Blue Lark Lives, #Ward is a wolf. By the time Ronaldo docked the boat at a private marina, the local news had broken into regular programming. Kellen Ward, his face pale and blotchy with fury, was holding an emergency press conference. "I am the victim," he blustered, jabbing a finger at the camera. "This is a sophisticated forgery, a desperate, coordinated attack by the criminal element I am trying to remove." But it was too late. As he was speaking, a breaking news chyron appeared at the bottom of the screen. CAD issues formal summons for Deputy Mayor Ward. Juniper felt a crack in the armor of pressure she'd been wearing for weeks. A few hours later, the second crack appeared. Her phone rang. It was the FWC agent. Her voice was thin, strained. "Miss Vale, in light of new evidence regarding the illegal surveillance device found in your home, the FWC is officially closing its investigation into your family. We apologize for any inconvenience." Juniper hung up. She walked to the small, quiet room in the North Star Center where Milo was sleeping. She sat on the edge of his cot, pulled him into her lap, and buried her face in the scent of his hair. She cried silently and hard. It was not the release of victory. It was the agonizing relief of a single battle won in a war that was far from over. Ronaldo found her an hour later. His face was grim. "The war just escalated," he said quietly. "My sources inside the Vulture network are reporting they are panicking. The head of the syndicate, a man they call Marrow Lynx, is gathering his entire crew." "Where?" "The old Star Rink, the abandoned roller skating rink on the border of the neutral zone. They aren't running. Juniper, they're preparing for a final cleanup. They're going to burn the Blue Lark to the ground, and they're going to find you." He stepped closer. "I can have you and Milo on a private plane in 1 hour. New names, new passports, a new life, anywhere in the world." He was offering her the exit, the escape, safety. Juniper looked down at her son's sleeping face. If she ran, Ward would beat the charges. The vultures would scatter and reform. The next diner, the next single mother would be swallowed whole. The system would win. She stood up, settling Milo back onto the cot. She turned to face Ronaldo. "No," she said. "Juniper, this is not a game. This is the end. They will be armed." "I'm not running," she said, her voice finding the steel it had earned. "I'm standing. I started this, and I'm going to finish it. We stop them. All of them." He searched her face, seeing the exhaustion, the fear, and the unbending iron beneath it. He nodded slowly. "Then we finish it." "On one condition," Juniper said, the pact between them now absolute. "My condition, we go there, we stop them, but nobody dies for me. No guns, no cleanups from your team. We beat them with the truth, with the light, not with bullets." Agreed. Ronaldo, a man built by violence, looked at the woman demanding peace. He held her gaze for a long, heavy moment. "Agreed," he said. "No one dies." The Star Rink was a concrete cathedral of decay. It smelled of mildew, ozone, and the faint, sugary rot of spilled soda from a decade prior. The vaulted ceiling was lost in shadow. The warped wooden floor of the rink cracked and uneven. Juniper, dressed in a gray maintenance jumpsuit that matched Nora's, checked the wireless lapel microphone pinned inside her jacket. It was live. The signal fed to a small, modified broadcast unit on a utility cart, which Ronaldo's two-man silent team had wired into the rink's old community speaker system. That same signal, tagged with a GPS location, was being fed directly to Bea Rooker. Across Falcon Bay, phones and computer screens lit up with a grainy, high-angle shot of an empty, derelict roller rink. "They're here," Nora's voice whispered in Juniper's earpiece. Headlights sliced through the darkness. A black town car crunched over the gravel outside. Deputy Mayor Kellen Ward emerged, tugging at the cuffs of his expensive suit. He looked pale and nervous. He was followed by a taller, unnervingly thin man with flat, predatory eyes, marrow links. They walked to the center of the rink, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. They were expecting a different kind of meeting. "Where is she?" Ward snapped, his voice high and thin. "They said they had the K accounts SSD. They said they'd trade." "Patience, Deputy Mayor." Lynx's voice was a low rasp. "They'll be here. They have a very good reason to show up." He smiled. "We made sure of the collateral." That was her cue. Juniper stepped out from the shadows of the skate rental counter. A single, harsh maintenance spotlight, which Nora had focused, hit her. She was illuminated, alone, on the edge of the rink floor. Ward spun, his face a mask of confusion and sudden, dawning horror. Lynx's hand dipped inside his coat. "Hello, Mr. Ward," Juniper said. Her voice, amplified by the speakers, boomed through the building and out across the internet. "My name is Juniper Vale. I'm the waitress you told to smile, the one who didn't." She began to walk slowly toward them, her work boots crunching on the warped floor. "You and your Clean East Bank project, you think you're building a brighter city," she continued, her voice steady, feeding off a cold, pure rage. "But you're building it on the silence of people like me. You demand we stay quiet. You demand we smile while you take our homes, our jobs, and our security. You think you can just erase us." "Shut her down, Lynx!" Ward shrieked, realizing this was a broadcast. "I'm done being silent," Juniper said, staring straight at the politician. "You stupid woman!" Lynx snarled. He was not panicked. He was angry. He turned to the dark shadows of the abandoned concession stand. "Bring me the guarantee." One of Lynx's men emerged, dragging a small figure by the arm. Juniper's heart stopped. The world tilted. It was Milo. They had taken him. From North Star, the one place she thought was safe, an inside man, a bribe, a betrayal. It didn't matter, he was here. His small feet stumbling, his face pale with terror. Lynx grabbed Milo, yanking the boy in front of him, his hand gripping Milo's shoulder. It was not a hug. It was an occupation. Juniper's breath hitched. She went white, her knees threatening to buckle. She could feel the gaze of the hidden camera. She could feel the gaze of the entire city. "You want to talk, waitress," Lynx sneered. "Let's talk. You want to talk about what people owe you. Owe me that SSD. You owe me your silence. Or I'll teach your son a lesson about smiling that he'll never forget." The threat was vile, absolute. Juniper shook, tears of raw terror streaming down her face, but she did not drop the microphone. She raised her head, looking past Lynx, past Ward, and into the lens she knew was watching. "Are you seeing this?" she choked out, her voice breaking but still amplified. A mother's scream broadcast to the world. "This is revitalization. This is Kellen Ward's Clean East Bank. He's using a child. He's threatening my son." "Now, Nora," Ronaldo's voice said in her ear, sharp as glass. "Plan B." It was a perfect coordinated storm of chaos. The main roof lights, the massive industrial floods that Ronaldo's team had been repairing, snapped on. They were angled down, blindingly bright, turning the center of the rink into a white-hot stage. Ward and Lynx cried out, throwing their hands up to shield their eyes. In that instant, Nora, hidden on the catwalks above, launched 3 smoke grenades. They landed in a triangle around Lynx, erupting in a thick, choking fog. At the exact same moment, Ronaldo's team cut the main power. The entire rink, outside of the blinding spotlights, plunged into absolute, disorienting darkness. Lynx, blinded and confused, released his grip on Milo to paw at his eyes. A shadow dropped from the ceiling. It was Ronaldo. He was on a safety harness from the catwalk, a piece of their maintenance disguise. He landed silently, a phantom in the smoke. He didn't have a gun. The rescue was not a firefight. It was an extraction. Ronaldo grabbed Milo, clipping a secondary safety line from his own harness onto the back of Milo's jacket. "Pull!" he yelled. From the catwalk, Nora hit the motor on the pulley. Milo was snatched airborne, yanked 20 vertical feet out of the smoke and confusion. Swinging clear of the floor, he was pulled directly into Nora's arms on the catwalk above. It was over in less than 3 seconds. Juniper ran, scrambling through the acrid smoke, her eyes fixed on Ronaldo, who was unclipping himself from the line. She grabbed Milo as Nora lowered him, burying her face in his hair, sobbing with a relief so profound it was painful. She never let go of the mic. "He's safe," she screamed into the feed, a raw cry of survival. "My son is safe. Nobody owes you a smile when they're just trying to survive." The combination of the blinding lights, the sudden loss of his hostage, and the wail of approaching sirens broke Kellen Ward. "You idiot!" he shrieked, his voice cracking with hysteria, broadcast to the entire city. "You've ruined me. You were supposed to handle her. I paid you for the whole district." The audio was pristine. The confession was absolute. The main doors of the Star Rink burst open. CAD agents, the real ones, flooded in, followed by a swarm of media, their cameras live. B. Rooker had led the cavalry. "Kellen Ward, you are under arrest." Ward collapsed, putting his hands up, weeping. But Lynx was a cornered rat. He snarled and lunged, not for an escape route, but for a rusted maintenance panel on the main support pillar of the rink. He tore the cover off, revealing a keypad and a single, blinking red light. "If I go down, you all go," he screamed, his fingers flying over the keys. "This place is rigged. The old ammonia pipe's a cold mine. This whole floor is going to flash freeze." He was about to slam the enter key. Ronaldo didn't hesitate. He moved, tackling Lynx at the waist, driving his shoulder into the man's arm, crushing his hand against the concrete wall just as his finger jabbed at the pad. A sickening crunch of bone echoed through the space. Lynx roared, his other hand fumbling for the backup switch. "The fuse! Juniper! The main block!" Ronaldo yelled, his voice strained as he wrestled the bigger man. Juniper, still clutching Milo, saw it. Her old tech school knowledge took over. The panel wasn't just a detonator, it was the master junction for the entire rink's defunct cooling system. She saw the main breaker bar. She put Milo down. "Stay here." She ran to the panel, grabbed the thick insulated master lever, and pulled with all her weight. There was a heavy, metallic thunk as the copper contacts separated. The hum of power died. The blinking red light on Lynx's panel went dark. The mine was offline. Sirens, handcuffs, and the shouting of police filled the air. CAD agents dragged Lynx away. Screaming, they pulled Ward, sobbing, to his feet. Outside the cordon, a new sound was rising. The residents of Falcon Bay, drawn by the live stream and the sirens, were gathered. They were cheering. Juniper picked Milo up, holding him tight, his small arms locked around her neck. She stood in the chaos of flashing red and blue lights, her jumpsuit covered in grime. Across the floor, Ronaldo straightened his coat. He met her gaze. It was not over, but the game had fundamentally changed. The CAD hearing was not a trial, it was a reckoning. Kellen Ward's defense, built on arrogant denials of sophisticated forgeries, collapsed in less than an hour. The evidence was a tidal wave. There was the K accounts ledger, retrieved from the Raven Key warehouse. There was the signed North Shore redevelopments contract, which Juniper had live-streamed from the harbor. There was the full, unedited audio recording from the Star Rink, capturing Ward's hysterical confession. "I paid you for the whole district, finally." There was the sworn testimony of a remorseful Brett Kincaid, who laid out the entire conspiracy, from the UCA extortion fees to the planned attack on the Blue Lark. Ward was indicted on 27 counts, from racketeering and conspiracy to commit arson, to the illegal weaponization of a state agency against a private citizen. The political fallout was nuclear. The Urban Commerce Authority, exposed as Ward's private extortion arm, was dissolved by a humiliated city council in an emergency session. In its place, a temporary body was established, the Interim Harbor Clean Board, its first action, funded by the seizure of Ward's civic partners' illicit assets, was to create a restitution fund for every small business targeted by the revitalization fees. The Blue Lark Diner was the first to receive a check. Aunt May cashed it, paid off the diner's debts, and then, in a move that shocked everyone, signed the building over to a new trust. The Blue Lark reopened 2 weeks later, but it was no longer just a diner. It was the Blue Lark Community Night Kitchen. The old, compromised POS system was in a dumpster. In its place was a simple cash drawer and a tablet running a secure, open-source payment system. Juniper, her old passion for systems design reignited, began holding free workshops in the back booth on Tuesday nights. She taught the other small business owners, the truck stop managers, the bait shop owners, how to spot malware, how to secure their networks, and, in one very popular class, how to build their own digital honeypots. But the largest change came from Ronaldo Lombardo. The night at the Star Rink, honoring Juniper's request of no guns, had changed his trajectory. He announced he was formally stepping down as the head of the Lombardo organization. It was not a simple abdication. He liquidated his assets, the ones built on gambling, fear, and shadow loans, and poured every last cent into a new, legitimate entity, the Falcon Cooperative. It was a labor co-op, owned and operated by the families of the Harbor District. The cooperative bought the deeds to their buildings, financed their businesses, and was governed by an oversight board of community members. Aunt May was elected its first chairperson. Ronaldo Lombardo took no title. He was just a member, his vote counting exactly the same as everyone else's. He was no longer a boss. As for Brett Kincaid, his testimony earned him a heavily reduced sentence. 5 years, with parole in 2. Juniper attended his sentencing. She did not speak on his behalf, but she did not speak against him. Later, she visited him in the holding cell. "You will serve your time," she said, her voice even, devoid of hatred. "And when you get out, if you are clean, you will have supervised visitation rights. Milo deserves to know his father, but he also deserves to be safe." She chose mercy, but she did not forget the boundaries. Months passed. The harbor, for the first time in a decade, began to heal. One night, Juniper was closing the diner. Ronaldo was waiting by the counter to walk her home. He seemed uncharacteristically nervous, shifting his weight. "Juniper," he said, his voice quiet. He slid something across the polished counter. It was not a velvet box. It was a simple, laminated card. She picked it up. Falcon Cooperative Family Health Plan. "The co-op benefits are active?" he said. His eyes locked on hers. Full medical, dental, vision, the best plan they offered. She looked at the card, then at him, a confused knot forming in her stomach. "That's great. Ronaldo. For everyone." "Yes," he said. He took a breath. The first time she had ever seen him look unsure. "I have to list my beneficiaries. I want to list you and Milo." He moved his hand to cover hers, his fingers warm. "If you say yes, Juniper, the first name on the card, is Milo's." It was not a proposal of diamonds or empires. It was a promise of health care. It was a promise of safety nets, of co-pays, of a shared future built not on power, but on partnership. A slow smile, one that came from her very core, spread across Juniper's face. It was the brightest smile he had ever seen, because it was 100% hers. "I do," she whispered, her voice catching. "Yes." She tapped the card with her free hand. "But I'm keeping the name Vale, at least until Milo is old enough to sign his own name on a document." The official reopening of the Blue Lark was a block party. The whole harbor district came. Inside, the diner was loud and bright, filled with laughter. Juniper, wearing a clean apron, was calling out orders. In the back, by the industrial dish sink, Ronaldo stood, his sleeves rolled up, scrubbing pots. Beside him, standing on a milk crate, was Milo, wearing a tiny, flour-dusted apron, helping dry the spoons. Juniper hung the new, handwritten menu on the wall, at the bottom. She had added a new special in her neatest script, the No Smile Ode pancakes. Comes with extra syrup. Smile only if you want to. She caught Ronaldo's eye from across the room. He nodded, drying his hands, and slipped out the back door. She followed him. The alley was quiet. A sudden oasis from the party. The air was cool and smelled of the sea. He just opened his arms. Juniper stepped into them, her body molding against his. This was not the desperate, adrenaline-fueled embrace of the greenhouse or the pier. This was calm. This was earned. He kissed her, slow and deep, a kiss that spoke of shared burdens and normalized happiness. His hand rested on her lower back, a simple, grounding touch. "I'm happy," she murmured against his mouth. "So am I," he replied. A massive cheer erupted from inside the diner. Pulling them apart, they walked back in, hand in hand. The entire party was crowded around the new flat-screen television Ronaldo had mounted over the counter. B. Rooker was on the screen, live from the courthouse steps. "It's a verdict," B. announced, her voice triumphant. "After only 3 hours of deliberation, Kellen Ward has been found guilty on all 27 counts. The judge is recommending the maximum sentence." The diner exploded. People were hugging, cheering, crying. Someone popped a bottle of cheap champagne. Juniper stood in the middle of it all, a pot of fresh coffee in her hand, Milo clinging to her leg. She looked at her neighbors, her friends, her family. She lifted the pot. "In Falcon Bay," Juniper Vale said, her voice clear and strong over the joyful noise. "We serve warm food and the right not to smile when you don't want to. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know, where in the world are you listening from? Let me know in the comments. Share your thoughts, and let's talk. Please consider subscribing to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. It really helps. And if you want more stories like this to be heard, please support us by hitting that hype button. It makes a huge difference.